following is a podcast brought to you by the Alex Kirsch Project.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The midterms are now over. Republicans now control the House. Democrats control the Senate. What's next for the United States? Donald Trump has announced a fourth run for president, believing it is up to him to save America. And the Senate has recently passed the Respect for Marriage Act. Who voted for it? Who voted against it? And what does this mean for the country? And why was this pushed forward? All of this on this week's events of Current Events on Tap. Listeners, and welcome to another episode of Current Events on Tap with your host, Alex Kirsch, a podcast from the Alex Kirsch Project. Hey, that's me, the Army retiree, the truck driver, and the pragmatic progressive political commentator. And so you know what? Sometimes I chase a little bit of clout here and there. If this is your first time listening, please do me a solid. Hit like and share and subscribe to my Spreaker, YouTube, Spotify, and my iHeartRadio. Show me some love out there. This podcast gives you this week's current events and what I also like to call
the beer of the week.
I pick one beer and I review it based on price, pour, aroma, taste, and then I'm going to give it an overall rating. Be sure to catch me every Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Spreaker, and catch me at your earliest convenience on the other platforms, YouTube, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Just type in the Alex Kirsch Project, or you can type in Current Events on Tap, and you will find this podcast. So, I'm very sorry that I took kind of a 2-week, not real hiatus. So, the other week, I had another event to take part in last Thursday, and then the last Thursday I also wasn't feeling last Friday I wasn't exactly feeling up to it. So let's just say I kind of had a break for about 2 weeks, but now it's time for me to do another episode, and I've really been looking forward to it because one of the things I kind of wanted to wait on was for the fact that I was waiting for the midterms to kind of get a little bit more finalized, because there's been like some votes that were just kind of waiting to come in, some votes that were waiting to get finalized, some elections that weren't fully determined just yet. So now that the midterm elections are essentially over, all for a couple of them, I feel it's time for us to actually start breaking down and kind of explain what's gone on with the midterms, with the elections, and a couple other issues. Now, there's a lot that's happened in the past couple weeks, but I feel like there's only 3 I really want to talk about this week because I feel they're going to take up the entire hour. Maybe I might go over an hour. Who knows? Because there's just a lot to cover in these topics. These 3 topics in specific, okay? So, but anyway, I hope everybody is having a safe weekend so far, or a safe Friday. It is cold right now in Michigan. It is snowy. Like, I was on my way back home, and I was going half past the speed of smell sometimes just because of the fact that the roads are really slippery and icy. And me driving a big rig, bobtailing essentially, it's really, really tricky. And I have this constant nightmare of what might happen if I lose control, which is why I drive so very carefully. And thankfully, a lot of drivers were respecting the fact that I was driving a lot slower than usual. So let's just put it that way. But hopefully everybody out in the state of Michigan is staying safe and staying warm, because it's only going to get colder the next couple days, and it's expected to snow just a little bit more. Where did the snow come from? Come on, seriously. I mean, it's only November, for crying out loud. But, you know, it is what it is. This would be my first official full-on winter in the state of Michigan, and it's something I got to get used to now that I am a Michigander. So, but hopefully everybody's getting ready for Thanksgiving, which is next Thursday. I know I'm going to be getting ready for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is my all-time favorite holiday. I can't wait to sit down and have turkey, stuffing, gravy. Oh, my God, I just love Thanksgiving. I love everything about Thanksgiving except for the history behind it. But, you know, we're not going to get into the history of Thanksgiving just yet. However, Thanksgiving is still one of my favorite because it's a time where family comes together. There's no obligation. You don't need to bring presents. All you need to do is bring food, and then everybody eats the food, and then everybody goes into a food coma for the next week or so. That's one of the things I love the most about Thanksgiving, is the great food that's involved. So, but anyway, that's not important right now. Right now, what is important is
the beer of the week.
The beer of the week this week is Bavarian Inn Dark Ale, which is brewed by the Mountain Town Brewing Company located in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. Now, a little bit of history about the brewing company. Now, I would do a history about the Bavarian Inn. However, because it's not brewed at the Bavarian Inn, I'm going to do the history on the brewing company. Now, maybe one of these days I'll do a little bit of a history on the Bavarian Inn because I feel it needs to be recognized as well. But not today, though. So, once again, the Mountain Town Brewing Company is located in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. It opened in 1996 as the Mountain Tavern Station Brewing Company and Steakhouse. It initially opened as a restaurant / wine cellar / microbrewery. However, in 2007, a separate company came in that was separate from the Steakhouse, and they formed what they call the Mountain Town Brewing Company. It specializes in making and shipping its own beers and its own recipes. Now, it's known for making such beers as the Gambler's Golden Ale, Rail Yard Raspberry Wheat, and Cowcatcher Red Ale. Each of these beers can be found across the state of Michigan, whether it's in bottles or on tap. Bavarian Inn Dark Ale is made specifically for the Bavarian Inn in Frankenmuth, Michigan, and it can be purchased either on tap, in the restaurant, or downstairs in the shopping area next to the bakery. So, on to the review. It has an alcohol percentage of 5%, and the style of beer that is made is a European dark lager. Now, I'm going to go rate it on a scale of 1 mugs to 5 mugs, 1 mug being the lowest, 5 mugs being the highest. Now, price. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. Now, I bought this at the Bavarian Inn while having a delicious meal, and I bought this beer on tap. Now, if you eat at the Bavarian Inn and decide to order this, it's $5.75 for a frosted mug, $7.75 for a 22-ounce mug, or $13.75 for a pitcher of beer. Downstairs, I think I paid about $16 for a 6-pack, but honestly, it's really not that bad because this is not a typical kind of beer you can just buy anywhere. It's very specific where you can buy this, and you can buy this, as far as I can tell, just at the Bavarian Inn. That's the only place that I have found that you can buy it at. So honestly, paying a little bit extra for a specific kind of beer or ale isn't exactly the end of the world, especially for one that's as good a quality as this one. So once again, I'm going to give that a 4 out of 5. So once again, I did pay $16 for it, but you know what? I'd say it's worth it. Now the pour, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. There's a nice little ratio between the foamy head and also the dark balance of beautiful dark color that's in there. Definitely a 4 out of 5. I definitely think it looks very appealing, especially when you drink it out of Das Boot that I bought. It's really just cool to look at, honestly. Now, the aroma, I'm also going to give that a 4 out of 5. It's very dark, malty aroma. It's very, very similar to Guinness. Not nearly as appealing as like a standard Guinness, but still, it has a very nice aroma to it. The taste is another 4 out of 5. Very, very nice, dark taste. Very pleasant aftertaste, actually. It's not very overpowering, honestly. You really get the malty flavors and just that beautiful, the aroma and the taste. It really just kind of goes together. It's definitely something that I would definitely drink over and over again, which is why I'm going to give this an overall score of 4 out of 5. I would love to get it a 5 out of 5, but I have to be consistent. It's a 4 out of 5. It's definitely a delicious dark ale. It's one that I definitely believe I would buy over and over and over and over again, just because, it's not one that you can typically buy anywhere as of right now. Again, I haven't been all over the state of Michigan. For all I know, I could go to Mount Pleasant, boom, it's right there. However, I can buy it in Frankenmuth, which I go to Frankenmuth pretty much all the time, as often as I can, and that's where I like to get my fix of beer. So, you know what? I'll keep buying this one. So, definitely, I give this a 4 out of 5. I highly recommend that you go out and buy this. It's definitely an ale worth drinking, especially if you're a person like me that happens to like your dark ales, your dark lagers, however you want to put it. It's delicious. Go out and buy it. Let me know what you think in the comments if you decide to make a trip up to Frankenmuth and buy this beer. However, as much as I would love to talk more about beer, it's now time to go on to current events. The majority of all the midterm elections are officially over. Now, before I actually go into what happened, I'm going to go into what was predicted by, let's just say, a particular ideology. We'll call it the red ideology or the conservative base.
I can't say for sure where the rumors of the red tsunami started because polls in almost every key race were within the margin of error.
Red wave rising. That is the focus of tonight's angle.
It's going to be a wave election, and you're going to lose the Senate, and I'll bet you $1,000 right now.
The knives are being sharpened right now for Joe Biden.
You know, Democrats are going to get crushed on November 8th because a red wave is coming.
But I'm betting that Joy will learn 2 new words on Tuesday. It's red wave.
How big could that looming red wave get?
We begin this Sunday morning with expectations of a red wave this Tuesday.
I think this election is going to be a red wave. I think we're going to win.
You know what? I think, your predictions of a red wave are accurate. And the reason I say that is because now even the mainstream media is catching up.
We've been hearing, is it going to be a red wave? Is it going to be a red tsunami? I think it's going to be a red hurricane.
When the red wave comes, and it is coming, Joe Biden's political utility is over.
Are we in for a red win here or a red wave?
Red wave or red tsunami? What are you feeling today?
I'm feeling red wave.
And don't listen to the lies they're spewing that this could take days or days, to know who won. This is total BS. A wave like this, we should know that night, basically, who won the Senate and the House. Anything that happens Wednesday into Thursday is gravy.
And right out the back door, I've got a tropical storm brewing right now. I think they're saying could be a Category 1 by the end of the day. However, let me tell you what is a storm, that red wave. I'm telling you, if there's any indication based upon what we're seeing this morning, somebody made a surfboard and said the red wave is coming.
So that's what was predicted. Here is the end result.
Donald Trump, he kept saying, we're going to be winning so much, we'll get tired of winning. I'm tired of losing. That's all he's done.
Donald Trump cost us the Senate twice in a row.
Our voters didn't show up. We didn't get enough voters. It's a complete disappointment.
We're not a cult. We're not like, okay, there's one person who leads our party.
If the voters conclude that you're putting your own ego or your own grudges ahead of what's good for the country, they're going to look elsewhere.
Trump is the past. Let's not vote Mitch McConnell into leadership. He doesn't deserve to be majority leader or minority leader.
Josh Hawley tweeted last night, quote, "The old party is dead. Time to bury it, build something new."
McConnell spent close to $400 million on these Senate candidates. I don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but that is a lot of money. And we didn't pick up a single seat. So either some of these candidates are garbage or the money's not being well spent.
So here's the funny part. It was not a red wave. These clowns said there's going to be a red wave, a red hurricane. Ted Cruz said a red tsunami. It was more of a splash, and now they are eating each other alive. They are sitting there pointing fingers at each other. Some people are blaming Mitch McConnell. Some people are blaming Donald Trump. Some people are blaming the candidates. Some people are they're blaming everybody. And then you got others out there that are saying that the elections were rigged against them and that there was massive amounts of cheating once again. It's completely absurd. But the thing is, there was no red wave. It was a splash. The Republicans barely squeaked by to win the House. But the fact of the matter is the Republicans are guaranteed to take the House of Representatives. It's already official. And we've already selected Kevin McCarthy to be the next Speaker of the House. However, the Democrats did win the Senate. Now, Nancy Pelosi, the soon-to-be former Speaker of the House, has essentially said that she's not going to run for another leadership position. She's going to remain in Congress. But she gave a very gracious speech the other day, which I'm not going to play the audio for that because I didn't think about it. But she basically talked about how she had the honor of serving 3 presidents, making a slight jab at a certain president, an orange president, might I add. But she talked about how she was glad to work with Bush. She was talking about she was glad to work with Obama, glad she was able to work with Biden. And she pretty much, everybody, there was a lot of people out there that actually showed a lot of respect for her. There's some Republicans out there that say she was probably one of the most prolific speakers of the House in the history of the country, which, I was not always a big fan of Nancy Pelosi, but I'm not going to get into that really. But it's because of other particular reasons. But yes, she left a huge impact for the Speaker of the House position. She shows that it is possible to be the Speaker of the House. And she's somebody that's able to stand her ground, essentially. But I honestly do think, personally, that it's time for her to retire because somebody attacked her husband. And this is a very serious thing. She has to be, protective of her husband as well. It's a horrible thing that took place. And all these people that are spreading the conspiracy theories still to this day about her husband is just completely unfortunate. But anyway, I got to get back to talking about the midterms. Now, for those that are not aware, and I'm pretty sure those that are only living under a rock are not aware, the Georgia Senate is going to be a runoff. and on the 6th of December, it's going to be decided whether Senator Raphael Warnock, the incumbent, is going to win re-election, or the election is going to go to Herschel Walker. Now, am I surprised that there's a runoff? Absolutely. Like, I still can't believe that people are voting for Herschel Walker. I mean, people complain that Biden can't string a sentence together. My God. Herschel Walker is in a different plane of existence sometimes when it comes to speaking. He has no platform. He has no ideas, no consistency, no real values. But yet people still voted for him. But of course, people still voted for Marjorie Taylor Greene. She won again. Matt Gaetz won again. You know, today it was announced that Lauren Boebert won her re-election by the slimmest of margins, and her opponent, Adam Frisch, called her to concede. So there's a lot of elections that I was like, wow, these people actually won their elections. But you know what? The people have spoken. As unhappy as many of us might be, the people have spoken. They have utilized their votes. As much as we can disagree with it, they still voted, they made their voices heard, and these people are still in office. As much as I don't like it, I don't like hearing about people like Marjorie Taylor Greene still being in office, because I think she is an absolutely horrendous individual and does not deserve that position of Congress, but she won it. And nobody's complaining about voter fraud there because she won by such a massive margin, honestly. Now, the Young Turks, hosted by Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian, they talked with Matt Gaetz after he won his election. And they asked him on what's the agenda that the Republicans, should they win the House? What is their agenda should they win the House of Representatives? And this is what they had stated. This is what he had said.
All right. So, Representative Gaetz, if the Republicans win the House tonight, what is your strategy going forward? What will you emphasize in the next term?
I think it's all the I's. I think it's inflation, immigration, and investigations. And we have a mandate now to try to limit spending. I think also people are very concerned about what's happening on the border. And when it comes to the weaponization of this government against our people, folks want to see the FBI, the Department of Justice, called to heel and called to account. That used to be something that liberals actually stood for, civil liberties and stopping the excesses of the politicization of investigations. And now the Republicans that will be leading the House Judiciary Committee will have that as our central focus.
That's right, folks. The 3 I's: inflation, immigration, and investigations. Now, before I really kind of take a deep dive further into this, talking about investigations, okay, the Republicans have pretty much offered nothing in regards to combating inflation. As a matter of fact, every time a bill came forward talking about how to stop price gouging at the pumps, the Republicans voted no. When it came down to a standalone bill to make sure that insulin is only capped at $35, they voted no. When there was a baby food shortage, the Democrats brought forward a bill to ensure that baby food could still be produced and they could bring it from overseas. The Republicans pretty much did absolutely nothing, and they voted no against that. Now, there are people out there that are going to say that there is, well, what else was in the bill? Now, I didn't have time to look through all these bills. From what I understand, the initial talk about capping insulin at $35 was included in the Inflation Reduction Act. And they were like, oh, no. Make this a standalone bill and we'll agree with it. So guess what the Democrats did? They made it a standalone bill, and the Republicans still voted against it. Now, this whole talk about immigration. Now, there's a lot about immigration that I still don't know about that I try to look into every so often. But all they continue to say is the Democrats want open borders. I have not met one Democrat that has advocated for open borders. Each and every one I've seen has advocated for a pathway to citizenship, which is different. Now, I got a friend that's going into Border Patrol, and he's giving me some information, what he's found out so far. But I'm not going to go into that just yet. It's a topic I'll probably talk about later on down the line. But the one that I'm going to focus on right now is investigations. This is the one that I'm just completely perplexed by. Because I go on Twitter quite frequently, and another social media platform I use is Discord. Now, it may not be a huge social media platform, but that's where I kind of see a lot of varying different opinions on there. Now, there are people, especially those that are most loyal to the divider-in-chief, Donald Trump, they believe that now that the Democratic Party have opened up Pandora's box, it is now time to investigate and impeach Biden. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene wants Biden impeached. Now, for what? I really doubt she has any idea. But as of right now, the opinion of many on social media is that they think they are high up on the food chain especially, they believe that they're going to get Biden for his son Hunter Biden and his business dealings in Burisma, located in Ukraine, and his dealings with China, all while Biden was vice president. Now, there's already been an investigation by a Republican-led committee, and they found no wrongdoing on Hunter Biden's part, and they found no wrongdoing on Joe Biden's part, the president's part, right, when he was vice president. But I guess they found something else new on Hunter Biden's laptop, which I'm very, very sus about that, because let's just remember, how is it that, Hunter Biden delivered his laptop to a computer repair shop to a partially blind guy, a legally blind person, and then somehow Rudy Giuliani got access to this Hunter Biden laptop, held on to it for a year, and then finally turned it over to the FBI. That, to me, is sus as hell. Like, that does not make any sense whatsoever. But yet, the people on the right, they believe this. Others think they're going to get him for asking for OPEC nations to negotiate the price of oil before the midterms. Last time I checked, I don't recall that being an impeachable offense. I mean, last time I checked, didn't Trump do the exact same thing? Yes, he did, actually. He most certainly 100% did. But that's not an impeachable offense last time I checked. If people are going to turn that into an impeachable offense, my God, how many presidents are going to be impeached for that then? Are we just going to go back and impeach everybody for that? Of course not. That's absurd. That's called negotiation. I mean, don't people want there to be a negotiation between other countries? What the hell are you talking about? Seriously. Then there are some others out there that want him to be impeached for the catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan. Now, there are Republicans out there, I seriously doubt that they actually give a damn about what happened in Afghanistan. Just like I don't think they really give a damn about the 13 service members that died, God rest their souls, because ISIS launched an attack on a checkpoint, essentially. Now, I'm simply thinking that this is going to be Benghazi 2.0, where they spent 4 years, millions of dollars, had multiple investigations and hearings with former Congressman Trey Gowdy, who in South Carolina was considered one of the most toughest, biggest pit bulls of a prosecutor. He was picked to head the investigation, and they found no wrongdoing on the Obama administration. Let me say that again. They found no wrongdoing on the Obama administration. Afghanistan is going to be the next Benghazi, though, without a doubt. Not really giving a damn about the dead, but they're still going to parade them and use their deaths as a weapon to wield against Biden. And regardless of what people might think, there was no way in hell we were getting out of Afghanistan smelling like roses. It was going to be messy. There was no way we were going to come out of there after 20 years looking good. It was going to be a complete dumpster fire. Why? Because it's almost impossible, after you've tried to establish a foothold for 20 years, after dealing with different tribals, different tribal ideologies, different cultures and customs, and dealing with corruption. And I'm not saying all of Afghanistan is corrupt, but there was a lot of corrupt people within the Afghan government and within the Afghan military. And then you've got, situations where they might not exactly like the U.S. military, where the Taliban would take advantage of opportunities to actually make things better for the people. Therefore, they're going to become loyal to the Taliban because the Taliban follows through with those promises. I mean, it is a messy situation. And of course, then you got people out there, they left $81 billion with equipment. Okay, I'm going to ask y'all this question, okay? Do you really think that if we tried to tell the Afghan military, hey, we know those weapons back, they would give them back to us? Absolutely not. Let me give you a hypothetical situation. I have 2,000 AR-15s, and I travel down to Texas, and I go around and say, hey, I got 2,000 AR-15s to give away, and I give them around to 2,000 citizens, and I come back 6 months later saying, hey, I need those AR-15s back right away. Do you think I'm going to get those AR-15s back? Absolutely not. They're going to look at me like I have got two heads growing, essentially. It's not going to happen. So they did the best they could to destroy some of the equipment to sabotage it because they knew the Taliban was probably going to take it over. But to find all that equipment is next to impossible. That is a logistical nightmare to do that. But yet people seem to think, Trump could have done that. That was good. Absolutely not. That was an impossible scenario. We made the best of it, and it still was horrendous. Like, I even said that the withdrawal from Afghanistan was absolutely horrendous. I did an entire bit about that, talking about how there was no way we're going to get out of there smelling like roses. But yet, there are people on the right that think, Trump could have done a better job. Absolutely not, he could have. I mean, if you don't believe me, look at how he did at Syria. And no, it's not a whataboutism. It's historical context, essentially. But anyway, I don't want to keep talking about Afghanistan, but this is what they're going to do. They're going to do investigation after investigation for retribution because we've investigated Trump. Therefore, we were meanies. Trump is being picked on. So that means turnabout is fair play. It's absurd. No real policies, no real ideas. They're just doing this just because, we have to get up a one-up on the Democrats. That's their main focus. It's absurd. The Democrats have continued to push forward policies that I think are great. Now, don't get me wrong. There has been some bipartisan deals that have been struck that I think are fantastic. The bipartisan infrastructure deal is one of the greatest things that we have done so far in decades because we are 13th, last time I checked, in regards to infrastructure across the planet. 13th. Yet we are one of the most wealthy nations on earth, but we are 13th in regards to infrastructure. How crazy is that? I mean, I shared an article on Twitter about how Navajo nations are finally receiving power. Navajo reservations are receiving power for the first time. It's great, but it's tragic at the same time. This just goes into further detail on how much we have continued to ignore the indigenous people because just now they're getting power. What the hell is wrong with us? But yet, this is why infrastructure is so vital and so important. Now, if the GOP puts forward legislation that benefits the American people, hey, I'll give them credit where credit is due. But they've got to prove it to me. They've got a lot of work ahead of them. But anyway, I got to move further into the midterms. So Carrie Lake, who was running for governor for the state of Arizona, lost her election, and I am so glad that she lost because she is an absolute nutcase. But guess what she's doing? She is not conceding the election. She is insisting that the election was stolen, that there is no way that Katie Hobbs beat her in the election because she did little to no campaigning. Well, I'm going to go into a little bit of further detail as to how that is possible, but not just yet. First, I'm going to talk about the state of Michigan and its elections. In Michigan, all three proposals that I covered in one of my earlier episodes passed successfully, and I am so glad they did. Governor Gretchen Whitmer and Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist II have been elected for another term. Unfortunately, Brian Jay for Congress, Burt Van Dyke for State Senate of the 25th District, and Paul Whitney running for State Representative in the 97th District did not win their races. They did campaign very, very well, and they busted their asses. We got to give them credit where it's due. The area we live in, however, the districts they were running in are heavily, heavily conservative. Now, I'm not saying that it's wrong for people to vote conservatively, but the opponents of Paul Whitney and Burt Van Dyke did pretty much no campaigning whatsoever because we looked up their campaigns and they pretty much didn't do a whole lot. They didn't do hardly any interviews. They didn't have much social media presence, yet they still managed to win. Now, why is that? How is it that they were able to win? It's because the area that we live in is heavily conservative. A lot of people close the ideas off of people voting Democrat in this area because some of them view Democratic policies as evil. I mean, we saw signs all throughout our area that says, vote no on Proposal 3. It's too confusing, which it's not confusing. Anybody that reads the policy and the proposal, it's easy to understand, but they pull out these giant billboards that say it's too confusing when it isn't. But yet the conservative base that will look at Proposal 3 is like, Proposal 3 is confusing, therefore I think we shouldn't be following through with it because it's really confusing. But they're not actually reading what the proposal was. Now, they probably got the gist of it, but I'm not saying that they truly understood what it was. Now, even Gretchen Whitmer in our county did very, very poorly, while Tudor Dixon did very, very well, but thankfully, she did not win. There is a lot to just go into detail on this, and I really wish I had more time to us. But again, it does not matter if you do a lot of campaigning because, like I said, Brian Jay, Burt Van Dyke, Paul Whitney, they did a lot of campaigning. They did canvassing. They went door to door, knocking on people. Hey, I'm Paul Whitney. I'm Burt Van Dyke, and I'm running for this office. Some people just were not interested, or some people just said, hey, I'm not going to vote this time around. My wife, she was doing phone banking, and either people would just hang up, or some people would say, nope, not interested. Some people said, nope, I'm not voting this year. Now, it is a person's right to choose not to vote. However, I feel you're missing a huge opportunity in not voting as well, especially if you're not willing to hear out how some of the candidates are. Again, it is your right to not vote, but it's just having met Burt many, many times and met Paul Whitney, these are two honest, blue-collar gentlemen that are just all about like understanding what it means to be a blue-collar worker or somebody that understands what it means to serve the public. Now, I wish no ill will upon their opponents because they're going to go on to the state Senate. But for the record, the Democrats have flipped Michigan blue for the first time since the 80s, I think. I think it was 1984 was the last time it was blue. They've taken the House and they've taken the Senate. However, as a country, what does this mean for us as a country, knowing that the GOP has taken the House and the Democrats have won the Senate? Well, for starters, I'm not 100% sure if the GOP in the House will do much aside from the investigations like I covered earlier. They had 2 years to come up with the solutions to combat inflation and did very little, if anything. They could have brought up an alternative to the Inflation Reduction Act, but they did not. They could have produced an alternative to the infrastructure bill, but they did not. But it still passed with bipartisan support. They could have brought up an alternative to the rising cost of gas, but they did not. While there may have been there might be some reasonable GOP members, as few as they may be. The fact that their main focus is on inflation when they have offered no solutions yet is going to be very interesting, to say the least. Immigration, once again, they've had a chance to offer solutions, but they are so focused on the wall, which has already proven to be an epic failure. And what is it with their investigations on Biden? Listen, if they have something on Biden that proves he is corrupt and he broke the law, hell, go for it. I don't care. Nobody should be above the law. But the fact that they think they're going to find dirt on Biden when they know for a fact that Trump is the most crooked and corrupt person to ever hold office since Nixon, and so many were unwilling to go after for fear of retribution by his loyalists, and those like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz and Lauren Boebert, I can only imagine the dumpster fire this is going to be. They tried to say Obama wasn't born in the U.S. They failed to prove that. He is born in the U.S., by the way. They claimed Hillary was solely responsible for Benghazi. They failed to prove that. They questioned her for 11 hours on her emails, and she never invoked her Fifth Amendment right, and they could prove no wrongdoing. 11 hours, and she never once invoked her Fifth Amendment right. They insisted the election in 2020 was stolen, and they could not prove it. So I will ask the GOP this. What will you offer we the people? You have been elected to serve the people. The question is, will you? Or will the puppet master that pulls your strings pull you in a different direction? This remains to be seen.
Always have known that this was not the end. It was only the beginning of our fight to rescue the American dream. And it's a word you don't use. 2 words. I don't want to be Joe. It's 2 words, American dream. That was not good what he did. There are a lot of bad things, like going to Idaho and saying, welcome to the state of Florida. I really love it. In order to make America great and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
That's right, folks. Trump is running for the office for the 4th time. That's right, 4th time, not 3rd time. Now, for those that don't remember, he ran for office for president under the Reform Party because he was inspired by Jesse Ventura for winning his election as governor for the state of Minnesota in 1998. Now, Jesse Ventura shocked the world by winning that election. And from what I understand, he actually did a very good job as the governor of Minnesota. And Trump was inspired by this, so he thought he could run for office for president under the Reform Party. But that campaign went absolutely nowhere. Nowhere whatsoever. He thought he could be a viable candidate, but like I said, it was a complete dumpster fire. He had no chance in hell whatsoever. Because let's just remember, being a third-party candidate is next to impossible. There hasn't been a viable third-party candidate for president since Ross Perot. Now, I'm going to kind of move on from this, though. Now, so again, this will be his 4th time running for president. God forbid should he win. He will be the first president to win an election, lose an election, and then get elected back into office. But let's put it this way. Trump insists that he and he alone is the answer to all of America's problems. He's even quoted in his book, The Art of the Deal, a book he didn't even freaking write, for crying out loud. He talks about eliminating business bureaucracy. He's quoted as saying this in his book. In most large corporations, getting an answer to a question requires going through 7 layers of executives, most of whom are superfluous in the first place. In our organization, anyone with a question could bring it directly to me and get an answer immediately. That's precisely why I've been able to act so much faster than my competitors on so many deals. Now, I have read and listened to 6 books on Donald Trump alone. And this is the most consistent thing that I found is he is the epitome of a person who lives by the mantra, fake it till you make it, then fake it some more. In the Bob Woodward tapes, the most recent book I listened to, in almost every interview leading up to COVID, during COVID, and after his presidency, Trump never at any point took any responsibility for his shortcomings or mistakes he made. However, he was always talking about how fantastic he was and how he made all this great change and all this progress and how he alone was the answer of what making America great again is all about. He has all the answers. He is the Rosetta Stone to unlock the key to America's greatness. That's all he ever does. He just talks about how great he is, and enough people are gullible enough to believe it because they buy into his BS. Now listen, I do not believe there is any such thing as a perfect president. In my personal opinion, the greatest president that we've ever had is Theodore Roosevelt. Even with his imperfections, there has never been a president that is perfect because people are infallible. No, actually, no, not infallible. People are fallible, actually. People are capable of making mistakes. People make mistakes, but the difference between like certain people and other people is that there are some people that learn from those mistakes. Because the best source of building character is acknowledging that you are capable of making mistakes and learning from the mistakes in the hopes that you don't make the same mistake twice, essentially. Now, over my 39-year life, to include my 20 years in the U.S. Army, I have learned that I am imperfect and I've made mistakes. And guess what? I am still learning to this day, and at times I still make mistakes. However, I take the time to learn. And if I'm not sure what to do next, I have no problem asking what I can do better to better myself. However, Trump believes he is the end-all, be-all. You can't teach him anything. He knows everything. He knows more about ISIS than any general. He's been quoted on this multiple times. Now, in the Bob Woodward tapes, Trump kept on talking about how he created the greatest economy in the history of the world, which isn't true. He said ISIS was completely destroyed, also not true. He said we were respected, also not true. He created record black unemployment, something he inherited. Then he would go around blaming everybody else for his shortcomings. He blamed China. He blamed Nancy Pelosi. He blamed the fake news media, the Democrats, Mitch McConnell, everybody but himself. He never, ever took responsibilities for his shortcomings. Why? Because that's the kind of person that Donald Trump is. Now, for the record, I'm not a psychologist, but Trump, without a doubt, is a narcissist. He continues to flaunt himself as a man of great success, when in fact, he isn't a great success story. As stated by the soon-to-be former governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan, Trump continues to lose. It's worse than this concept of losing. It's the fact that when Trump was in power, he truly believed he would be the greatest president ever, and he even believed himself to be the greatest president for black people since Abraham Lincoln. Even though Bob Woodward reminded him of LBJ, who signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Now, while Trump likes to flaunt his successes and ignore his failures, let's take some time to talk about those failures and the things that really stood out with me in regards to Trump. Now, I'm only going to cover a few, because if I covered every one of his failures, this would be like a 4 or 5 hour show, essentially, all right? For starters, he appointed the most unqualified people to top position roles in his administration, especially members of his family. Those who were appropriate to the positions to include former Secretary of Defense James Mattis. Trump thought he would have an army of yes men and women who would do his entire bidding, no questions asked, and they would do whatever he demanded them to do. That turned out to be untrue. He had the highest turnover rate of any of his so-called administration by any administration of 91% by the end of his first term. 91%. That is a colossal number. Now, I don't expect people within an administration to stay on board. That's absurd to think about. However, 91% of an initial A team that you might have is completely unheard of. I mean, Reagan was the last person, I think it was like 84%, if I'm not mistaken. He was also impeached twice. Now, say what you want about the impeachments. The quid pro quo impeachment about Ukraine, it tanked because of key witnesses that were not being allowed to testify. Witnesses like John Bolton, who was his former national security advisor. Now, I don't like John Bolton. As a matter of fact, I think he's a chicken hawk, a guy that joined the Army Reserve so he didn't have to go to Vietnam. But the thing is, though, he was willing to testify against Donald Trump on this whole quid pro quo bit. However, he was not allowed to testify, and there was a few other key witnesses that were not allowed to testify. And had they been allowed to testify, the impeachment trial could have turned out significantly different. However, it didn't. It failed, and then Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman was pretty much thrown out of the White House, as was his twin brother. The January 6th impeachment failed, not because of a lack of evidence, but due to members not thinking it was worth it to impeach a former president. Statements made on the Senate floor was empty of the Republican Party, essentially, and yet those Republicans still voted no when the time came. I remember seeing the hearings. I remember seeing how few were in the room, or how few were so interested in what's going on, and when it came time to vote, they voted no. Even Mitch McConnell was quoted saying, "Well, I don't think it makes sense to vote to impeach and convict presidents no longer in office." I mean, it just goes to show how spineless he truly is in regards to that. He knows that Trump was guilty of sending that mob to the Capitol, but yet they did nothing about it. Now we got the January 6th committee. Now that's in danger of basically being tanked because the Democrats were unable to win the House. He approved of the Keystone XL pipeline, which was rejected by former President Obama due to consistent uproar by the indigenous territories on those lands who felt their lands would be greatly harmed, not on the if, but when. If a pipeline struck a leak, the oil would seep out into their drinking water. Now, let's just be perfectly candid. Oil companies do not exactly have the best track record in regards to cleanup. As a matter of fact, when there's an oil spill, it takes a great deal of effort to clean up, and there's not even a guarantee you're going to collect all the oil. And guess what happens? The people's drinking water is going to be affected. Now, the Dakota Access Pipeline, which drew a lot of criticism, especially against the Obama administration, it was initially moved away from Bismarck, and it was actually moved to the Lakota Sioux Nations. Now, the reason why it was moved was because there was a great chance that the oil was going to go into the Bismarck's water supply, which is a very, very justified and reasonable request to move it. However, once it goes onto indigenous lands, all bets are off. Hey, screw the indigenous. Let's just build an access pipeline here, even though it puts people at risk. Now, we have screwed the indigenous for centuries. Let's make no mistake about it. We have screwed them for centuries, and the fact that our government was willing to allow a private corporation to build a pipeline that could leak oil into their drinking water system is nothing short of offensive and is wrong. But yet, Trump just went through with it. Horrible thing. He has still refused to release all of his tax records. Every president, even now Biden, has managed to release their tax records and their returns, but Trump still has not. He's consistently called Senator Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas because of her Native American heritage. People who support Donald Trump think that's hilarious. To me, it's not hilarious. It's immature. It's just high school stuff. But yet, people think this is hilarious that he does this. He insisted that 3 million illegal voters voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016, which wasn't true. He withdrew us from the Paris Climate Accord. Now, let's be honest up front. Climate change is a constant threat. There's enough science and data to back that up, yet there are ignorant people who think Bubba, the guy doing research on InfoWars, think he is more credible than people who dedicate their entire life to understand the Earth and its climate. Now, having a relationship and a partnership with other countries across the globe is, in fact, in our best interest and chance in combating climate change. He also cut pandemic early warning program in 2019, a program that was established by the Obama administration, might I add. He cut corporate taxes to its lowest rate since 1939. The tax cuts benefit the elites. The elites that somehow the GOP seems to be fighting against, but yet they always seem to want to make these cuts for the super wealthy. They're the ones that say that make the most, but they pay the least in taxes. Now, we the people, the ordinary citizens, do not really benefit from these tax cuts. Those who said, I saw my money in my pocket right away. Well, I didn't. I saw very, very little change in regards to my bank account. He oversaw the longest government shutdown in U.S. history because he wanted his damn wall, for crying out loud. When he was speaking on the issue of the school shooting in Parkland, Trump insisted that he would have run into the school to put a stop to the shooter himself. Yet people bought into that. Downplayed the COVID virus and insisted the whole situation was a hoax, and insisted that China let loose the virus deliberately, calling it the China virus or the Kung flu. And his rhetoric resulted in an uptick of attacks on Asian Americans all across the country. Now, I'm not just talking about like Chinese Americans. We're talking about Japanese Americans, Thai Americans, Filipino Americans. You know, all different Asians felt themselves being attacked by members of this country. And I'm going to talk about like they were attacked by all different ethnicities in this country simply because of their Asian heritage, which is completely unacceptable. Insisted that the 2020 election was stolen with no proof whatsoever. What's even more dangerous, his rhetoric on January 6th led to the mob storming the Capitol. The rioters were looking to cause harm to our elected officials, to include the Vice President, Mike Pence, who, to his credit, remained at the Capitol to finish the certification of the election. Now, I could name so many more, but God, I would be here for hours on end. But as of right now, Trump is being investigated by the Justice Department still for his having classified materials in his home of Mar-a-Lago, something Trump still thinks is a grave injustice. He goes on to play his usual game of whataboutisms, insisting that Clinton stole classified documents, Bush stole classified documents, both him and his dad stole classified material, Obama stole classified material, yet he's innocent. Seems legit. For the record, nobody else has taken classified material. It's all bullshit. Trump, on the other hand, took it because he firmly believes that these documents belong to him when they do not. Now, why am I worried? If he lost before, he could again, right? Wrong. When it comes to people like Donald Trump, the only thing I'm hoping for is that should a stronger, more conservative opponent challenge him like Ron DeSantis, who was governor of Florida, I believe Trump could in fact divide the Republican Party to the point where they no longer focus on policy but rhetoric. Now, should DeSantis end up winning the nomination, Trump has two options: concede or start his own ticket. If he does that, that could take a lot of votes from the conservative base and basically leave whoever the Democrats have, whether it's Biden or somebody else, to basically sail into the presidency. Now, that's a hypothetical. It's not a certainty. It is a possibility, but not a guarantee. Trump could very well win that nomination. You see the cultish behavior of his supporters. He campaigns unlike anyone else we have ever seen. He raises an absurd amount of money, and while his crowd sizes are not as large as they used to be, he still gets people out to see him. He riles up bases and gets people fired up. He makes empty promises and people believe in him. He manages to get people to donate to him, even if it's under false, weird-ass pretenses. That is what he does. He's like Vince McMahon and P.T. Barnum, someone who puts on a show and excites his base, even if it's all a facade. Now, should Trump get the nomination, we could very well be one election away from Trump enacting every bit of vengeance upon his adversaries and enemies. Hell hath no fury like a Trump re-elected scorned. If we thought his first term was a disaster piece, his retribution against those who oppose him will be the fire and fury he promised Kim Jong-un, just without the nukes. The Senate recently passed the Respect for Marriage Act, which ensures marriage equality and for LGBTQ plus couples and interracial couples to be federally protected across the entire country. The vote was 62-37, with 50 Democrats saying yes and 12 Republicans voting yes. Susan Collins of Maine, Rob Portman of Ohio, Tom Tillis of North Carolina, Mitt Romney of Utah, Shelley Moore of Capital of West Virginia, Cynthia Loomis of Wyoming, Dan Sullivan of Alaska, Roy Blunt of Missouri, Richard Burr of North Carolina, Joni Ernst of Iowa, Todd Young of Indiana, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. This was to ensure the Supreme Court didn't do what it did to Roe v. Wade and send the issue to the states. Now, there is a reason why protection of marriage equality must remain federally protected. While there are those who insist that this is not in any danger of being voted on the Supreme Court as it is law, well, so was Roe v. Wade. Even Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas wanted gay marriage to be looked at again in an opinion piece he wrote after Roe v. Wade was sent back to the states. Now, I took part in a debate a while back, and my opponent and myself were asked if we believed marriage was secular or religious. My opponent insisted it was a religious institution, and I stated it was secular. Since the dawn of mankind, there have been thousands of different cultures, customs, tribes, and civilizations, each with their own laws, rites of passage, and ways they conducted marriage. Now, times have changed, and so have the civilizations. While there are many who lean conservative, have become more progressive in regards to marriage equality, like the ones I listed above. Even Mitt Romney, who in 2012 believed that marriage should be between man and a woman, gave the following position following the Mormon Church's position, which he is a member. Now, this is quoted in People magazine. The Mormon Church is quoted as saying, "We believe this approach is the way forward." The Mormon Church said in a statement, "As we work together to preserve the principles and practices of religious freedom together with the rights of LGBTQ individuals, much can be accomplished and heal relationships and foster greater understanding." In his own statement, Romney said the legislation provides important protections for religious liberty, measures which are particularly important to protect the religious freedoms of our faith-based institutions. Romney added that while he believes in traditional marriage, Obergefell is and has been the law of the land upon which LGBTQ plus individuals have relied. This legislation provides certainty to many LGBTQ Americans, and it signals that Congress and I esteem and love all of our fellow Americans equally. Now, while I vehemently disagree with his point of view in regards to traditional marriage, Mitt Romney voted yes. And even though he still believes in traditional marriage, we don't always have to agree with him, but he voted yes. Now, do I like Mitt Romney? It's very hot and cold, 50-50, I'd say. I did vote for him in 2012 simply because at the time, I didn't really approve of the job that Obama was doing at the time. However, Mitt Romney has, at times, he's voted for issues I disagree with him on and voted for issues that I felt that were great for him to agree upon. Now, he did vote against the PACT Act, and I was very, very critical about him on that. However, I'm glad that he voted yes. I'm so glad that he also voted yes to confirm the newest Supreme Court justice. He was very proud to do that. I'm also glad that he was one of the one dissenting vote to choose to impeach Trump for January 6th. He was the one dissenting vote in the Senate. He was very emotional about it too. Now, many people want to say this is a step in the right direction, but we need to remember one thing. There are still 37 people who voted no. Now, how many thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of people who still believe in traditional marriage? How many people are against marriage equality for LGBTQ Americans? How many are against interracial couples? Now, there is a reason why it's dangerous to send civil rights issues like this back to the states. Now, it's not because I don't think the states believe they know better. It's because of historical context is why I think it's dangerous. Now, I'm going to take you a trip down memory lane. There was once a governor of the state of Alabama by the name of George Wallace, who was quoted as saying the following: segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. He wanted to keep segregation in the state of Alabama forever. Would he? Depends on the people who follow his rhetoric. It took the federal government to send in the National Guard to ensure that segregation ended in the state of Alabama. Just think if that never would have taken place, if we left it to the states. And it's not just the segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. Think about when it was states' rights to own people, to own slaves. We fought a civil war over states' rights, as they might put it. But states' rights to do what? To own people. It's concerning to me that 37 people in our elected positions voted against civil rights. I consider marriage a civil right. It's astonishing that so many people believe civil rights need to be left to the states. Think for one moment. Say you are an LGBTQ married couple living in California. Then your spouse gets a great job opportunity in Mississippi. The cost of living is lower. You find a better house there, and you and your spouse pack up and move. And once you get settled in, the job that your spouse has gone to in Mississippi is everything they wanted in life. Then a law gets passed where marriage equality, especially between LGBTQ plus people, is no longer recognized. All the benefits that you now have and are entitled to, like every heterosexual couple, is void. Your marriage is no longer considered legal. However, you have no way of leaving the state as of right now because you don't know where you're going to go. Because after all, it does cost money to move. Your spouse's job that has no guarantees in the states you go that they're going to move back to. You don't have any opportunities to go anywhere else, and you're stuck like Chuck. What do you do in that scenario? Because you can't just pick up and move. Where the hell are you going to go to? It costs money to travel from one side of the country to the next, especially if there's no guarantee that your job's going to be waiting for you on the other side. Is it far-fetched? There are women in this country right now who would have to travel to another state just to get an abortion. There are others who can't even travel to another state to have an abortion because they don't have the financial means, and they can't get away from their job for the time being because, appointments that they could have made in their state, they have to travel to another state, but yet it's backlogged, and then they got to take time off to come back to another. It's a complete mess. And what if they do travel to another state? When they come back, they might get screened. It's not far-fetched. This is why situations like this, leaving it to the state, poses a greater threat to a person's right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is 2022, and it is crazy to think how close we could be for other people to lose their civil rights here in this country that is supposedly the land of the free. There are people who think that allowing gay marriage destroys the sanctity of marriage, which is the most absurd argument ever. The people complaining about the sanctity of our marriage the most are the ones electing people like Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, what does the sanctity of a marriage mean exactly to people? Well, if you want my people, it just means loving and understanding of your spouse. Knowing that neither of you are perfect, but all that matters is you two are perfect for one another. Now, marriage is not simply an institution, as people may put it. It's a partnership. Every struggle you go through together. Now, I have seen relationships and marriages aplenty deteriorate and fall apart for a variety of reasons. It would take me an extra hour to go over. I mean, my God, that's just, that's like a marriage counseling course, essentially. Now, we want to talk about what makes a couple, especially one who wishes to get married, what makes them want to get married. You have to ask yourself, is it because they share the same values? Is it because they share the same common interests? Were they set up by a mutual friend, by family, or were they just a fling that turned into something a little bit more serious? Now, we ask these questions because some people wonder, what is it that makes us attracted to one another? It's more than just feelings or a need for companionship. It's just a desire to have someone who will go through the fires of hell with you, who is willing to face adversities and challenges and overcome any odds you may face. Marriage is a commitment with both parties involved. It's never a one-way street. To insist that members of the LGBTQ community cannot share these qualities like those of us in heterosexual relationships is absurd. Members of the LGBTQ community have served and are serving in our military. They are doctors, they are firemen, EMTs, accountants, politicians, bankers, mechanics. Some of them are even truck drivers and hairstylists, for crying out loud. They are a part of us. They are us. The last time I checked, we were all Americans. To deny them the same basic civil rights, to include not allowing them to get married because of some religious ideology or just because of your own indifference, is no difference from telling minorities, specifically black people, to drink from a different water fountain. Taking away the word marriage and replacing it with civil unions is the new separate drinking fountain. If we are going to be a country that practices what it preaches, then marriage equality for the LGBTQ community and interracial couples needs to stay protected, and the Senate has spoken. The people have spoken. There are many who are against us, against any of this ideology, and we must do our part to stand with those who brave the trials of facing this indifference. For this is a battle they have to face for the rest of their lives. I'm privileged. I don't have to worry about this. There are other people out there that do have to worry about this. Some people wake up every day to wonder, am I going to be harassed for who I am? Now, there are some people that are interracial couples that do face some level of indifference, and it's horrible. Nobody should face that kind of indifference. I have a very, very simple rule. At the federal level, the only law that should be in place is consenting adults. Once you're a consenting adult, it doesn't matter. Gay, straight, LGBTQ+, interracial, it does not matter. It could even be weird. I mean, we could even go back to the days of Anna Nicole Smith getting married to a 90-year-old oil heir or whatnot. Yeah, people think that's weird, but you know what? It's legal. It happened. She was an adult. He was a 90-year-old man. It's weird, yeah. Seems a bit awkward. But the thing is, though, consenting adults is the most important aspect we need to focus upon. It's so crystal clear, honestly. But the thing is, though, we tend to make other people's happiness our business. And that's the thing we need to remember. Marriage is a civil right. It's not a civil union. It is a civil right. People should have a right to be happy. And for us to deny them to have this happiness does not make us the land of the free. It's quite the opposite. We need to focus that these people just want to be happy like the rest of us. They should be given that entitlement. And before anybody else talks about, oh, well, just so you know, LGBTQ plus couples, there's a lot of domestic violence. There's a lot of domestic violence within heterosexual communities as well. Marriage is not always easy. It's very tough at times. Sometimes there's a lot of challenges involved. They should have every right to go through the same trials and tribulations like I go through every day. And guess what? It's pleasant. I love being married to my wife, Claire. She's my everything. She's my best friend. We've had some rough patches, but you know what? Every couple has rough patches. Everything is fantastic. I'm not talking about like rough patches like any of the negative. It's just like financial hardships. It's a hard thing to go through. Moving is a hard thing to go through. But we still did it. We've made it possible. Me being gone throughout the week is difficult, but we make it work. It's because we have a commitment to one another. We're partners. That's what marriage is all about. That's what marriage truly means. Fighting through thick and thin to make things better. It's that simple. And I'm so glad that the Senate approved this because it protects a civil right for people across the country. So in closing tonight, I want to take the time to thank everybody that decided to listen to the show, whether it's live or on the replay. Feel free to leave comments within the comment section, whether it's on YouTube or on Spreaker. But I just want to let you know, every day in this country is a new chapter, for better or for worse. Every day we see something new and we learn from our news experiences here. There's going to be some really rough patches up ahead. Inflation's still up there. Gas prices are still up. And guess what? I just covered how civil rights are still in danger of being taken away at any time. And it's up to us to make sure that we spread the message on why it's important to protect civil rights. But it's also really important for those of us that lean more progressive that 2024 is going to be a real big dumpster fire, honestly. There's going to be a lot going on in regards to that. Regardless of who the Democratic president is, they're going to have to deal with either people like Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump. It could be Kristi Noem from South Dakota. I mean, there is a lot of obstacles up ahead. The House GOP is going to present a lot of obstacles up ahead, I'm guessing. For all I know, it could be a good time or it could be a challenging time. It could be a great time. Who knows? I don't have a crystal ball. However, with the people that are sitting in office right now, all they're going to be focused on right now is the 3 I's, as I covered earlier. It's up to us to stay informed. That's why it's so important. You don't have to take my word for it. You can do your own research in regards to that. You can find one resource. You can find a different site. You can do whatever it means, what it is to keep yourself informed. But the fact of the matter is, don't just take what I say as gospel. Do your own research. Trust but verify. It is that simple. Because the thing is when you give all your trust into one person, it is dangerous. Because when you trust that one person, they could tell you that the sky is green and you'll believe them. And that's a dangerous way to look at things. I know that Biden is not the most perfect person. He was given a shit sandwich and he's had to take a few bites into it. And guess what? He's getting blamed for it, but he's taking it on the chin and he's still pushing forward. Governor Gretchen Whitmer had death threats against her life and she's still pushing forward. There are some people that are able to go through the fires and trials and tribulations and still come out on top. I don't expect people to be perfect, but I expect them to be strong, moral leaders of character. Biden's not perfect. Governor Gretchen Whitmer is not perfect. There is no perfect politician, and there's no perfect person and no perfect party. However, you have to ask yourself, who represents your values more? It's that simple. Anyway, thank you to everybody that tuned into the show tonight. And I just wanted to let you know that I appreciate everybody that listens to the show, downloads the show, and gives me positive feedback and lets me know what they think of the show. What I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong, my podcast sucks, what have you. Thank you to everybody that always continues to listen in. And always remember to stay vigilant, stay informed, stay hydrated, and keep yourself well vigilant. Thank you to everybody, and I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving and has a safe weekend. This has been a podcast brought to you by the Alex Kirsch Program. Thank you for tuning in.